Our first reading on this fifth Sunday of Easter comes from the Acts of the Apostles. We want to reflect this Sunday on glorifying God, giving God the glory. Of course, we know that God is full of glory. He is the glorious God. But it is also our obligation as followers of Christ to always focus on God and to render Him the homage that He deserves. To Him be the glory and not to ourselves. But we, disciples, missioners on this earth, how do we glorify God? In the first reading, we find almost the conclusion of the first missionary journey of Paul and his companion Barnabas. And we see how the missionary activity of dedicated disciples, this gives God glory. Look at the short story presented in the first reading for today, and we can learn from Paul and Barnabas how we can glorify God through our Christian mission. First of all, through their commitment and perseverance. No trial was so great that they could be prevented from going around to make God known in Jesus Christ. This glorifies God, our commitment, our perseverance in making God known. Secondly, St. Paul and Barnabas encouraged the other believers. They knew that on account of their faith, they were subjected to many trials. But you see, as a Christian community, Paul, Barnabas, and the others, they showed to the world that they were really brothers, able to encourage one another, build up one another, strengthen one another in faith. That is also glorifying God. The third element is, when they went to other communities to visit them, Paul and Barnabas narrated to them the many things that God was able to accomplish through them. How God had helped them accomplish these things. You see, that's a very good way of glorifying God. Tell the stories of the action of God in our work, in our accomplishment, so that the glory does not come to us, but to the God who has called us, who has sent us, and the God who has accompanied us in our mission. And finally, according to the first reading, they also glorified God by rejoicing at how God opened the door of the faith to the Gentiles. Porta Fidei, the door of faith. This is what we are celebrating this year, the year of faith. They glorified God because the faith is offered universally. It's offered to all, not just to the chosen people, Israel. So here, we have many different ways of glorifying God in and through mission. All the baptized are called to mission, and as missioners, we should give glory to God. Our second reading for this Sunday comes from the book of Revelation. We have been reflecting on giving God the glory, glorifying God. And in the first reading, we see how the missionary activity of the early apostles was really an act of glorifying God in Jesus Christ. Now, in the second reading, we see this vision granted to the Apostle John, the vision of a new heavens and a new earth, the vision of a new Jerusalem coming from above, meaning it is God who produces, who constructs a new Jerusalem. And let that be the entry point for our reflection on the second reading. It is not only individual apostles, it is not only mission that could give glory to God. Our communities are called to be the living sign of God's glory. If only we embody in our lives, in our relationships, in our activities in the world, the character of the New Jerusalem from above. The New Jerusalem is not only God's creation, it is also the dwelling place of God among people. Imagine a community that is distinguished from other communities because it is God's dwelling place. And by that very fact, people around the world will look at that community and recognize God. That is how a community gives glory to God, by making God known and seen by others. And let people say, yes, God really dwells among them. But how can that happen? How can our families, parishes, dioceses, religious orders, how can our nation give glory to God by being the New Jerusalem? Here, it is rooted in the covenant. I will be their God. They will be my people. This relationship between God and His people, mutuality, mutual fidelity, not abandoning one another, sharing the same fate, same destiny. This is the root of a community's being able to give glory to God, such that in and through this community, people will know that there is a God who makes all things new, the God who can renew the face of the earth. And looking at this community, some of them might even get jealous. How come they can be like that? How come they can be the face of a new humanity and a new world? What is their secret? And hopefully they will discover it is God from above that has made them such a community. So my dear friends, let us look at our families, our parishes. What type of community are we? Are we being recreated from above by our covenant with God? For it is only by engaging in that continuing renewal of our covenant with God will we give glory to God as communities. Our gospel passage for this Sunday comes from St. John. We have been reflecting on glorifying God. You know, this is the season of Easter, and with the triumph of Jesus over sin and death, our proper response is to glorify God. And in the first reading, we find how the early missionaries, Paul, Barnabas, gave glory to God through their mission, commitment, perseverance amid trials, by encouraging other people, and by recounting the many good things God has accomplished through them. The glory was not directed to the apostles, but to God. And also, they rejoiced, they gave glory to God for opening the door of faith to the Gentiles. The universality of God's love was a cause for the apostles' growing conviction that God's will for salvation was really for all. In the second reading, we find this vision of St. John in the book of Revelation about the New Jerusalem created by God, a new people, a new city, rooted in God's covenant relationship with His people. And this community is supposed to be the image of the presence of God, the dwelling place of God in history. And by being true to the covenant with God, this community really glorifies God, really proclaims the goodness, the beauty of God, and the beauty of having this deep relationship with God. So the quality of community is also a way of glorifying God. In the gospel, we find Jesus talking about the moment of glorification. The Son of Man will be glorified, and with him, God the Father will also be glorified. Of course, the resurrection, as we said earlier, is the moment of supreme glorification of Jesus. It was at the resurrection that people came to the faith conviction that this was truly the Lord, this was truly the Son of God, and they glorified His name and glorified the Father. But in the Gospel of St. John, it was not only in and after the resurrection that Jesus and the Father were glorified. Even on the cross, the death of Christ was also a moment of His glorification and the glorification of the Father. Why? What is there on the cross of Christ that gives God glory and that glorifies Jesus Himself? On the cross, Jesus showed us the greatest love of all. The love that is able to give oneself totally to the God that you believe in, without any hesitation, without any condition. The Father is glorified by the Son, who gave Himself totally, completely to fulfill the Father's will, in obedience, in love. At the same time, on the cross of Christ, we find a love, call it a human love, that is extraordinary. It is a love that embraces sinners. It is a love that embraces enemies. It is a love that covers everyone. It is universal love. And so on the cross of Christ and in His resurrection, we are told, if you want to give glory to God, love. Love fully. Love completely. Love without condition. It is love, the way Jesus loved, that glorifies the Father. Now, after explaining this, Jesus leaves to His disciples and to us a commandment. And rightly so, it is a commandment of love. Love one another. If we want to glorify God, then we should exercise love for one another. But some of us might say, "Oh Jesus, you said you are giving us, leaving with us a new commandment. But loving each other is not a new commandment. So what is new in your commandment?" Well, what is new is, He said, "Love one another, such as my love has been for you, so must your love be for each other." That's where the newness enters. We are not being told to love one another, period. We are being told to love the way Jesus loved. Love one another as I have loved you. And so, it is by loving God and loving our neighbor the way Jesus loved that we can glorify the Father. And then He adds, "And this is how all will know you for my disciples, your love for one another." So we are back to the second reading. What defines the New Jerusalem in our times? What will make our communities really the face of Jesus? By our love for God and for one another. So, it simplifies Christian life. Love glorifies the Father. Not any brand of love, but the love of Jesus. And we see in the first reading how this love of Jesus impelled Paul, Barnabas to be the loving missioners to other people and to the Gentiles that Jesus really wanted them to become. So I'm inviting all of us, I'm inviting you, brothers and sisters, let us give glory to God through our loving commitment to the church and to our brothers and sisters. Love, that's God's glory.